Welcome to the HawkCast with your host, AJ Hawk.
Well, it's nice to meet you, man. We were at Ohio State at the exact same time, and I'll never forget you guys winning that championship the 14-0 year. So it was pretty epic.
Yeah, man. I guess that's why I'm so curious about your whole story. Then, as you said, you're from Ohio, went to Ohio State, and now, so for people, it's Coyote Peterson's on here. I don't do big intros, Coyote. So the good thing is people will see your name, they know you. So you have like 8.8 almost million YouTube subscribers, and it seems like that came about pretty quickly, didn't it?
It did. Yeah, we launched our YouTube channel in September of 2014. So between that time and now, we've ended up being one of the fastest growing channels on YouTube's platform in YouTube history. Certainly between our second and our current state. It took us about a year to get to 100,000 subscribers. And from there, the channel just sort of exploded, which I think as many people would agree that it sort of began with the me being bitten and stung by things certainly created that phenomenon. But then, of course, our real goal is to bring people education and entertainment through the world of animals. So
where are you sitting right now? A lot of people would just download the audio, but some people like to watch video. You have a bunch of merch behind you, it looks like.
Yeah, actually, so that I'm not bugging all my producers at the moment, I'm actually in our merchandise storage room at the moment. We figured this would probably be the quietest place where we don't have people coming in and out. I got the whole editing team working today. 4 producers in the office. So we're in between production trips right now and a lot of good stuff that's going on. So they said, let's go put Coyote back in the merch closet where he won't be distracting anybody and we won't be distracting him. So this is perfect.
Does everybody call you Coyote, or what do your parents call you?
My mom calls me Coyote. She's called me Coyote for a long time. My dad still calls me Nate. But for the most part, people call me Coyote at this point, unless it's like a business situation or I'm walking into a meeting that's something really professional. I may introduce myself as Nate or Nathaniel, but everybody's like, can we just call you Coyote? And I'm like, of course you can call me Coyote. So, yeah.
Well, for people that don't know you, what was there one pivotal moment or one pivotal video that put you on the map, or I guess that put you out in front of people?
Well, the whole bite and sting and coyote going through pain sort of things really began when I was quilled by a porcupine intentionally to show you how to remove those quills from your hand, or of course, like the snout of your dog, if your dog ever gets too curious to one of those animals. But I'd say the episode that, well, at least to this point, that has the most views on our channel is something called the cow killer, which is a velvet ant, which is a wingless species of wasp. And then, of course, the bullet ant, which I believe also just crossed 30 million views, which was the big episode that we did about this time last year. So it's definitely those big bite and sting episodes that people, if they don't know my name, they will just point at me and be like, hey, aren't you that guy that gets bitten and stung by stuff on the Brave Wilderness channel? I say, yeah, that's me. But did you see all the conservation and education-based stuff that we have too? And they're like, oh yeah, we love all that, but tell us what the bullet ant sting is like. So, I certainly don't mind being recognized as being the guy that's taken all these bites and stings. But again, we're always trying to point people towards the education.
What was the initial goal, I guess, when you started the Brave Wilderness channel on YouTube and you did this? Did you know you were going to take all these bites and stings?
No, none of that was ever premeditated. I mean, we've been developing the Brave Wilderness brand for a little over 6 years now. And the first 3 years of development really was a lot about us trying to get a television show. We started to develop what are called sizzle reels, which is basically an elaborate trailer of highlights of us going out into the wilderness, catching rattlesnakes, getting up close with alligators, catching snapping turtles, doing some dangerous stuff in that Man vs. Wild-esque camera style. And then we took those pitch reels to every network, Discovery, Nat Geo, really pretty much anybody that would listen. And everybody told us no. They said people just are not interested in a single hosted series anymore talking about animals. And we said, well, River Monsters and Man vs. Wild are like the two biggest shows in this space right now. And you've got Bear Grylls and Jeremy Wade, both single hosts. We just didn't get it. And then they say, well, animals, we've got Planet Earth these days, and nobody really wants to hear people talking about animals. We're like, well, Steve Irwin, Jack Hanna, Jeff Corwin, these guys all have amazing careers. I think people still want to see that. But again, everybody said no, closed the doors. And then we finally actually got our foot in the door with Discovery Digital Networks. And this was a new branch that Discovery was creating at the time to sort of fill that space in the digital media platform. And they said, look, we've got a channel that we're launching called Animalist, but we have no budget, but we have distribution. They're like, if you can go out and fund whatever this show is you're talking about, we'll give you some room for distribution. We said, well, okay, we'll do that. We got some angel investors to put a tiny bit of money in, and we went out and filmed the first 50 episodes of Breaking Trail over the course of the summer of 2014. And that's when it all launched with Discovery Digital Networks. And at the same time, they said, well, let's create you a YouTube channel. And at the time, we were thinking, well, YouTube, isn't that just where people put videos of their cats and dogs? And we're like, we have no interest in that. We thought that being on Discovery's digital platform would lead to a traditional television show. And then as the YouTube channel started growing, we were seeing no positive growth from being part of Discovery Digital Networks. We said, all right, maybe there is something to this YouTube game. We were then approached by a couple of professional YouTubers. And at the time, we had 10,000 subscribers. And they said, look, your content is different than anything that anyone else is creating. Plus, it's at a quality that's unlike anything that's being done on YouTube, and we basically encouraged to just keep going with it. And then it just started to catch on like wildfire, I guess.
Wow. So then are you connected to Discovery Digital at all anymore?
No, not at this point. Discovery Digital Networks was technically what's called an MCN, which is a multi-channel network. So we were a part of that program, but our channel was growing at such a speed that we were eclipsing a lot of the other channels they had. A lot of the sort of advertising deals that we were hunting after weren't coming directly toward us. So we said, look, we're honestly doing better just by producing this content on our own. And it had always been our intellectual property, us funding it. Discovery wasn't getting behind it financially at all, which is a big misconception that a lot of people think Discovery funded a lot of our early days, which, just to clarify, there was no financial investment from Discovery whatsoever. It's all completely funded by us at Brave Wilderness. And we said, look, we're going to go it alone. And they said, okay, we parted ways on really good terms. Still friends with everybody at Discovery Communications. We actually still participate in Discovery Education, which is a program that reaches schools, around 65% of the schools throughout the nation. So a lot of our content filters through them to make it into school. So we have a great relationship. We just separated our YouTube channel from them ultimately.
So that they didn't get their hooks in you, and they don't have any of your future. They can't. You own all your stuff. That's the old trick, like the old music industry. They have a 360 deal, and they want some of your merch, all of your future stuff. So that's good. You broke away. You got a clean break.
Yeah, well, actually, in this, biggest piece of advice I could ever give to anybody starting a career in entertainment is get yourself a really good attorney. And we had an amazing attorney that's been with us since the beginning. Every one of our contracts were locked airtight when it came to us actually owning the intellectual property at the end of the day. Because that was the big thing with even a lot of the television networks that we were speaking with. They didn't want the concept we had, but they said, look, we love you as a host. What if we develop a concept for you? And we said, well, okay, well, that could be interesting. And then before you know it, you're getting contracts coming across your plate where all of a sudden you're signing your life away at the end of the day. And it's like, look, we have a lot of confidence in what our design is, and we stuck with it, followed through. And today we're larger than any of the major networks in the digital space. And certainly when it comes to providing animal adventure content, proud to say that we are number one in the world at this point.
Well, you're definitely you're one of the first, I don't know if it's the first, but you're a prime example of someone who you don't need a Discovery Channel. You don't need the Travel Channel, because you're getting way more views than anything they could ever put on their networks.
Right. What's interesting is one of my producers and I last night, just out of curiosity, were looking at some of the late night shows. I was lucky enough to be invited on Conan O'Brien last year, which he's always been one of my favorites, and that was such a huge honor. And we're in talks with a couple of the different late night show hosts now, hopefully being on there the beginning part of this next year. And regardless of if that happens or not, we were just digging and doing our homework. And somebody like Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, they're doing around 2.8 to 2.5 to 2.8 million views a night. And we're like, well, how does that relate to the content that we're doing? And on average right now, we're doing about 2.8 to 2.9 million views a day on our channel, which is crazy considering it's YouTube. But, we love being on this platform because of how much creative control we have and how we're able to reach our audience twice a week, or really any day of the week if we choose to upload a video.
Do you have any aspirations to try to get on a network someday? Like, what if ABC, NBC came to you and said, hey, we want to run a Sunday morning show with Coyote?
We've got a couple of different things that I can't dive too much into at this point that are in the works for 2018. Some of the bigger distribution platforms, if you will, that are at power right now. And again, that's if it comes to fruition. Certainly always open to the idea of any opportunity that will allow us to reach an even wider audience when it comes to bringing animals, entertainment, and education, and of course, a message of conservation to not only the generation that currently loves animals, but also, of course, the future generations of kids that are going to grow up watching our content.
So the one thing that's, I think now, right, in the news always, it seems like, is this big game hunting when people go over to Africa or whatever and they have these high fence farms and you pay 40 grand to shoot a lion or a zebra or something. I've watched the documentaries. I know Louis Theroux did a good one about conservation, and it's kind of confusing to me, though. These people say, if we don't have these hired hunts to where we get 30 grand for someone to come shoot one, we cannot conserve these animals. They will not be around anymore. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I don't ever dive too much into the politics of hunting per se. I'm often asked that question, how I feel about hunting in general. And the answer that I usually like to give to people is that, look, when it comes to hunting and fishing, let's say fishing or hunting for white-tailed deer or something like that, if you're hunting to provide food for your family or your friend's family or people in need, certainly I can support something like that. When it comes to trophy hunting, something like an elephant or a lion, it's not something that I've ever understood. Whether I was a kid seeing pictures of people behind giant grizzly bears, propping their heads up, it always broke my heart to see what that is. Now, I do know that in a lot of instances with the conservation that happens in some of these other countries, you're right. It does require some sorts of major funding, and a lot of times it does come from people coming in and paying to hunt. But at the end of the day, I mean, my personal opinion on it is just it's not necessary. Big predators are in the environment to help control and balance the ecosystem. So if we come into an environment and we're taking out an animal just to simply put it up as a trophy on the wall, again, in my opinion, that's not exactly allowing the ecosystem to balance itself properly. But, rules and regulations are different in every country, and I'm not one that personally would ever go and do something like that. But, I know a lot of people receive a lot of heat from doing that big game hunting. And at the end of the day, I would say it's a big no when it comes to shooting a lion or an elephant. But if you're going to shoot a deer and feed your family, I can be okay with that.
Do you hunt at all?
I do not. I do fish occasionally, but at this point, I'm a lot of catch and release for the most part. We've done a couple of fish episodes in the past, one about a rainbow trout, one about a salmon. And when I realized how difficult the struggle was for these animals, once I really did a lot of research, I sort of took an approach that, okay, if I've caught one of these animals on hook and line, respect that animal for a second, try to handle it as gently as possible, and still release it back into the wild. Now, does that mean that I won't eat a good piece of salmon at a restaurant? Certainly not. But when it comes to catching fish in the wild at this point, for the most part, I just release them back into the wild.
So you don't go full vegan like people, or the vegans that are wearing leather boots and stuff like that you see happening now?
No, a lot of people will actually write in on the YouTube channel and ask, is Coyote a vegan? Is he a vegetarian? No, I'm about as carnivorous as it gets. I'm a big meat eater, actually, but I try to make sure that as much of the meat as I consume is stuff that's raised organically. And a lot of times I try to support the local farmers markets, certainly here in Columbus, and especially in the summers at the farmers markets. I will spend my weekends shopping for my groceries for the week at these places to buy a lot of the locally grass-fed beef and free-range chickens and stuff like that.
Were you in Ohio when the guy, I believe maybe around Zanesville, committed suicide and he had all these wild exotic animals? And if you were, can you explain what happened exactly? I kind of forget, but it was crazy when this thing happened.
I don't know any more details than anybody else that was privy to the media that was happening at the time. And I think everybody that was involved in it did their absolute best to make sure the situation was handled not only within the media, but of course the safety of everybody in that area. And it was heartbreaking. When I heard about that, I think there was something around like 40 or 50 animals that were killed. A lot of them being big game animals like tigers and lions. I know there were some bears. I know the Columbus Zoo did a phenomenal job coming in to rescue a lot of the ones that weren't killed. I think there was a jaguar and a couple of other things. And that, I think, sparked this great conversation not only here in Ohio, but everywhere when it comes to owning exotic pets. I mean, it's one thing if you're running a wildlife sanctuary and you're rescuing an animal that was taken into captivity and that somebody couldn't then take care of. And we've worked with several sanctuaries that do exactly that to, save and rescue animals that can't be released back into the wild. But when it comes down to having 6 tigers and a bunch of lions, again, to each their own when it comes to things that you're into collecting. But I personally think that it's just not necessary at the end of the day. And you certainly have to have a means for taking care of animals like that. And I'm not saying that the people out in Zanesville didn't have that. I'd never visited that facility. But I do know that it was just really tragic that all those animals had to lose their lives basically due to human error, ultimately, at the end of the day.
Oh, no question. And I don't know all the details, but what really bugged me about it was, so the guy, I guess, he opened his gate. He had all these exotic big game animals at his house, which was crazy. And he opened the gate and then committed suicide, I guess, after he opened the gate. So he knew the animals would get out, and they all scattered around Ohio. And so people are thinking they're scared to death. Like, we got lions and tigers running free in Ohio. And Jack Hanna, who I love, we live 3 minutes from the zoo here. Jack Hanna is being interviewed on CNN, and they're trying to give them grief for shooting these tigers and lions and everything, saying, can't you just tranquilize the poor animals? And I'm thinking, what if this lion is carrying his baby in your mouth? You want us to tranquilize? Like, why would you let it get to that? You can't try. And Jack he handled it very well, but it was saying, you know how dangerous it is to try to tranquilize a lion out. We can't even find them. We don't know where they're at. We're in the dark. They're scared to death, and it takes time. You can't just shoot them with a dart and they go down right away. Can't they still roam around for a couple minutes?
Yeah, I mean, I personally have never tried to tranquilize an animal, certainly nothing like a lion or anything like that. And again, I think Jack and the Columbus Zoo did a phenomenal job handling it from every direction. And was there another alternate as to not actually destroying the animals? I'm not sure. And of course, I wasn't there on the scene when any of that went down. I mean, it was actually before we even really started sharing our content with the world. But I think that the law enforcement officials did what they felt was the right thing to do at that time to, again, preserve human life at the end of the day, which, the fact of the matter is they were concerned that I think a lot of those animals would get off of the property. Now, was there a better way to potentially handle it? Maybe. I'm not sure. But again, I think that everybody that was involved handled it to what they felt was the best of their abilities to make sure that everybody was safe at the end of the day. But again, it's just tragic that any animals had to lose their lives in an instance like that. And again, it sparked great conversation and different, legal aspects when it came to actually keeping exotic pets here in Ohio.
Well, I think the only thing you could think of is, how about we not let a guy that was going to commit suicide and open his gates have a bunch of exotic animals in his backyard? That's really go back to the root of the problem.
Right. Well, again, that's the good thing that at least that sparked is that I think some of the regulations that are in place now when it comes to the type of exotic animals.
Yeah. What are they? I've seen documentaries. Sorry to cut you off. I know it's changed in the last couple of years, I guess.
Right. And I don't know the details of it because honestly, I don't keep any exotic pets, but I do know several people like in the world of reptiles specifically here in Ohio that do keep exotics and venomous snakes. And obviously a snake is something much different than a lion or a tiger, but there is a lot of permitting that you have to go through in every state just to keep any specific animal. I mean, something as simple as a snapping turtle, right? A non-venomous, threatening animal, unless you enter into its environment, you have to have a special use permit in most states to even keep and house something as simple as a snapping turtle. Now, when it comes to something like a venomous snake, obviously the regulations are different depending on what state you're in, but I do think requiring exotic and venomous animal pet holders to have the proper permits and keep up with those regulations is important at the end of the day so that it is a controlled situation. I know a lot of the people out there that are in the world of reptiles that have these collections, they're very committed to what it is, and they're doing a great thing, especially for the husbandry and the breeding programs that exist that preserve a lot of these species. So as long as people are following the right rules and regulations and we're keeping good records of who has what, when, and where, I think we'd be in good shape.
What about primates? You ever deal with them?
I've dealt with a couple of different monkey species, none of the great apes at this point. We're actually in pre-production now of potentially doing a mountain gorilla episode in 2018. So those would be my first encounters with large apes. I've been up close with chimpanzees before, but we've never done an episode with them. And they're amazing, and they're really intelligent, and certainly an animal I'd love to get the chance to work with.
I think chimps are amazing, but have you dealt with like mature, older chimps?
No, young ones. And I know that, to a certain sense, they have an intelligence and a mind of their own. And I've, of course, read a lot of the stories and seen a lot of things where chimps can go from behaving one way one day to another the next. And, they're highly intelligent and, not far off when it comes to intelligence from humans. So we have bad days. They're going to have bad days. It's just something I guess you have to understand.
Is that what I've heard that do we have like 93% chimp DNA? Is that correct?
I'm not sure what the percentage is exactly, but yeah, I know it's pretty close between us and a lot of the great apes.
Now, how's your relationship with Jack Hanna? Are you guys close?
No, I mean, I've met Jack a few times. He's always been like just the nicest guy in the world. He's given me some amazing compliments. And this was real early on in the developments of our shows. I don't currently have like a withstanding relationship with Jack. I mean, we don't talk on the phone, but if I ever see him in public, I walk up, say, hey, how you doing? And he'll ask me, how's production going with my stuff? And I actually haven't seen him in a couple of years, so I don't know if he's even aware of what it is that I'm doing these days. But he's always been a huge inspiration to me. I mean, when you look at somebody who's had, a lifelong career when it comes to animals and entertainment, I don't know that anybody's done it better than Jack Hanna.
Jack is hilarious, man. We actually ran into him at the Columbus Zoo maybe last summer. We've known his daughter a little bit over the years, and different people at the zoo. We get to go see some of the animals that they take on the TV shows with them. And we ran into him, and Jack was he's the man. Like, he's in his own world. He is so into just animals. He always wears the khaki gear, and he's just so unique and so funny to me. And I guess that's what put him on the map, really. What was it, Letterman, that he went on? He's just so goofy and had such a good rapport.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I always tell people when they say, a lot of times I'm asked, who inspired you growing up to go into this field? And there are the obvious choices like Steve Irwin and Jeff Corwin. But Jack Hanna was huge for me. Just, I grew up in just outside of Cleveland, but I always knew who Jack Hanna was. I mean, he was on the news stations up where I grew up. So I would see this guy on TV with his, sort of jungle attire talking about animals. And it was just, he always had such an upbeat and electric personality when it came to talking about the animals. And again, just the career that he built for himself and all the people that have surrounded him is just, he's the godfather of animal adventure shows at the end of the day. That's how I oftentimes define him.
Yeah, he really is. But what about with you? Like, have you gotten to the point now where you get stung and bit so many times? I know you do a bunch of other content as well, but obviously it's like a NASCAR race. People like to see the crashes. They want to see it. Have you gotten to the point where it's like, what do you guys want me to, like, I'm going to have to die. Do I have to die soon to satisfy it? Because you've gone so far with all of this now. Like, where do you go?
Well, that's a great question. And I know at least our audience wants to know, well, how far are you going to take this? And to be honest with you, it ends this year. We just did I take that back. There's one more sting still to come that we have filmed. So there's something called the Insect Sting Pain Index, which was the sort of cartographed map that I had been climbing over the course of the past 2 years. There was the rumor that there was something more painful than the bullet ant sting, which was supposed to be what's called the warrior wasp. And that's an episode that we had that just came out just previous Thanksgiving. And then just after finished filming the warrior wasp, which was not more painful than the bullet ant, we discovered something called the executioner wasp, which had never been documented before as far as somebody being stung by it. I have been stung. I won't tell you how that ends. I believe the episode is coming out this June. Let's just say it's going to top off the Insect Sting Pain Index in incredible fashion. When it comes to bites, the most painful bite I've ever taken actually comes out in 2 weeks, and that's from something called a giant desert centipede. It's the first time I was actually sent to the hospital for one of these bites or stings. It was that bad.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's the biggest thing, I guess, you've been bitten by?
I mean, I guess I was bitten by a grizzly bear once on accident during the filming of an episode that we did called Grizzly Bear Attack, where I actually showed you what to do during the attack of a grizzly. Now, keep in mind, we were working with a bear that had been raised in captivity But in the process of filming the episode, and in a very non-aggressive way, the bear did latch onto my back at one point and bit me, full mouth spread over my back, and I got 4 like massive impact marks on me as I like jumped up and said, "The bear bit me, the bear bit me." And the trainers were like, "There's no way." I was like, "Oh yeah, he bit me." And again, it wasn't an aggressive thing. I made the major mistake of, I'm sure you know this from your football days, putting Flexol 454 on your sore muscles, right? And it smells pepperminty. The bear thought that I was a treat, because what they will do during his training is he eats these little cinnamon rolls as a reward for following commands. He thought that I was a treat, I guess, of some sort. And I took a bite, but that's something that never made it out into an episode. But yeah, bitten by a grizzly bear is the largest animal I've ever been bitten by. Of course, there's been alligators and alligator snapping turtles, handful of other animals that are non-venomous, some that are venomous. The unintentional Gila monster bite was one of the worst I ever went through. But at this point, the giant desert centipede is without question the most painful bite I've ever taken.
What do so are we just not aware, I guess, of all of the dangerous things that live all around us that could kill us? Like, say in Ohio, is there any venomous, there's no venomous snakes here, is there?
There are copperheads down south. There, you can also occasionally run into timber rattlesnakes. Up in northwestern Ohio, you also have something called a Massasauga. Those are also out towards the border near Pennsylvania as well. But these are very reclusive animals, and your odds of running into one, let alone being bitten by one, are slim to none. And in almost all instances, certainly with the venomous snakes in the United States as a whole, is they're much more inclined to just sit there and try to stay camouflaged than they ever are to bite you. You really have to antagonize these animals to get them to be aggressive in many instances. You have to keep in mind, animals are always more afraid of us than we should be of them, and want to do everything in their power to potentially do their best to get out of the situation. So a lot of instances where people are bitten, let's just use a snake as an example, right? Let's call it a rattlesnake. Let's call it the Southwest, and somebody finds it in their backyard. Maybe you accidentally are bitten by it when you're gardening or doing something like that. But oftentimes it's people poking at a snake or trying to hurt the snake or get it away from them that will then sort of enact that biting and defense mechanism. I've worked with many species of venomous snakes. And again, I'm certainly not encouraging anybody to ever get close to a venomous snake, but in almost all these instances, it's been very difficult to get that snake to actually strike. Like if we're trying to get a shot where a snake strikes at a camera, that's a very difficult thing to do. Most of these snakes will just curl up into a ball and say, "Okay, if you're not poking at me with something, I'm going to stay totally camouflaged, and hopefully you as a human are going to walk away, and then I'm going to be totally safe."
What about spiders? Are there venomous spiders in Ohio, or poisonous?
Yeah, down south, you occasionally can run into a black widow. I've found black widows before in Ohio, way down near the Ohio borderline. Also, brown recluse will occasionally pop up. Now, the brown recluse is the most dangerous spider species.
Yeah. And they're in Ohio? I didn't know they were in Ohio.
Yeah, they're very few and far between, but there are occasionally reported cases where people are bitten by recluses. And they're a very nomadic species, which means they're constantly moving around hunting for their food, right? They don't build a web like a black widow. So a black widow is a web builder, waits for its food to come into the web, and then they have a meal. But a recluse is actually moving around, and that's why people are oftentimes bitten by them. And it's not likely to kill you. Is it possible that it could kill you? Yeah, depending how your body reacts to the venom. But in almost all instances, people survive the bites of both the black widow and the brown recluse. As a matter of fact, there's been nobody since the mid-50s that's died from the bite of a black widow.
So do you go to the hospital and they have anti-venom, or what do they give you?
In all instances, if you are bitten by a black widow or a brown recluse, or some sort of bite shows up on your body where you're like, man, this is starting to look really bad, the best thing to always do is seek medical attention. Because what I always tell people is that just because something's venomous doesn't mean it's going to kill you. It's all about how your body reacts to that venom. So you could be stung by a honeybee, and if you're allergic to that venom, to the different peptides and proteins in that venom, it could send you into anaphylactic shock, and that's what would kill you. And at the end of the day, that's usually what kills people, is the shock that their body goes into. Now, when you're talking about something like a rattlesnake, the Western Diamondback specifically, the way that their venom works is it actually breaks down your red blood cells, and it will kill your skin and eat your flesh away. So depending how much venom has gone into your body, again, also depends on how your body will ultimately react at the end of the day. I mean, I know people that have been bit by rattlesnakes. They haven't even gone to the doctor. They've just said, okay, let's see how my body reacts, swells up really bad. And within 48 hours, if they aren't noticing any major discoloration in the tissue, they think to themselves, okay, I'm fine. I should be all right. Then again, I know people that have been bit by something like a water moccasin, also known as a cottonmouth. Just a single fang nicked the tip of this one of my friend's fingers. He lost the whole top of his finger. Virtually no venom went into him. And again, it's how your body reacts to the potency of the venom.
Have you been bitten inadvertently by snakes?
Not by snakes. I'm very, very, very careful when it comes to working with venomous snakes. And in many instances, I don't handle a venomous snake unless I absolutely have to for a scene. And oftentimes, even when I do handle them, I use something called snake tongs, where I can control the front end of the snake and simply hold it from its tail. There's no reason to ever run the risk of being bitten by one of those snakes. Now, in the past, I've worked with things like eastern diamondbacks and western diamondbacks, have held these snakes, and I'll do something called heading the snake, where I'll hold it by its head and show the audience exactly what the fangs look like. But again, in that instance, it's a risk that at the end of the day really probably isn't worth taking, and we've really sort of gone in a direction away from ever handling venomous snakes.
So what kind of insurance do you have to get when you go out and do all of this?
Pretty good insurance. I mean, at the end of the day, I classify myself as an educator that makes wildlife videos. But my job isn't necessarily any more risky than somebody that's working construction or a lot of our law enforcement or firefighters. At the end of the day, no matter what your profession is, I mean, look at you as a football player, a lot of risk involved in what that is. So it's just, what is the element that you're getting into that essentially becomes the most risky? Honestly, it's the environments that we enter on a production location basis that are more dangerous than the animals themselves. The natural elements that we run into, whether it's slipping and falling when you're out there trudging through the underbrush, or being in a swamp and not seeing a hole that you could step into, twist and break your ankle. So I often tell people it's the environment that's more dangerous than the actual animals.
Have you ever done, so is Bear Grylls still doing his show? Do you know?
Bear no longer does Man vs. Wild, but he does a series called Running Wild with Bear Grylls that I believe is on ABC, which is sort of his graduated version from Man vs. Wild. I don't know if you ever saw the episodes where he took out like Will Ferrell and Jake Gyllenhaal.
Marshawn
and people
Lynch.
love those episodes. Yeah, and they said, okay, well, we've got to do this on a much larger scale. And I know he did a deal with ABC. I think it's in his third or fourth season now. Bear also does a lot of stuff over in the UK as well. I mean, he's got multiple series in the works right now, but the standard where it all started, the Man vs. Wild, is no longer, I don't believe, with Discovery at this point.
Well, I think it probably ran its course a little bit, but I know there was things where they came out where people would recreate it, and they were showing he was there was some production value, like there was some production there where he wasn't exactly in the position that he made it look. Right.
Well, and to defend and also to defend both sides of that story, because we produce in a very similar fashion. People have to remember at the end of the day that production is tough. I mean, every time we make an episode, anytime Bear would have made an episode, there's a production team, and that's essentially a mini movie every single time you do an episode. So while Bear certainly without question spent extensive amounts of time out there in the wilderness filming himself, being there overnight with the camera crew, but certainly there were breaks in production where they had to go back to an established base camp. And whether that base camp was in the wild or that was at a jungle hut or a hotel or something like that, of course, because you need to recharge camera batteries, you need to change out equipment. There's a lot of things from a production aspect that I think they were called out on unfairly that people just didn't really take into account. Now, when you've got a show like Survivor Man with Les Stroud, have you ever seen it?
Oh my God, I wanted to ask about him. That seems completely good. That's going to break my heart if he's not real.
No, Les does his production, and people don't understand how hard it is to produce the content that Les produced. I mean, Les is the original vlogger in a sense, and to go out there and vlog yourself in the wilderness like that, yeah, Les 100% was filming all that stuff himself. And I can say that not because I know Les, but because I know production and I know what it takes to get those shots, and I know how he did those things. Now, did he meet up with a team every couple of days to swap out batteries? and stuff like that for his cameras? Maybe so. But again, there's always a production element to things, and he was without question on his own. Bear had a camera team, and one of the things that we like to do with our shows, we've done more and more of, is actually showing the audience the camera crew, showing you the small team that we work with.
I like that you do that. You don't try to make it, you're right. You can see your cameraman on all your different shots a lot of times.
Mm-hmm. And we're always very honest and upfront with our audience. And sometimes, people will say, well, are you provided with animals in any of these locations? And on very seldom occasions, we'll work with wildlife sanctuaries and say, look, these animals are being provided to us today, and we'll give a really detailed description as to where this animal came from. But when you're talking about our big adventure episodes that are out there in the wild, all of what you see is the real thing. We will set out and spend, 10 to 15 hours in the field searching for animals, actually catching or getting close to them naturally in the wild. And then, of course, once something is caught, we'll move our set, find a spot that's like, okay, the lighting is good here, the camera team is set, and then I'll get into the presentation. A lot of people also think that we write scripts for our shows. Everything is improv. The only thing that is ever scripted is the intro and the outro to a show, which is obviously voiceover cut to B-roll shots that just sort of ties things together. But once you're into the meat of the episode, that is 100% improv. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and that's how it goes down.
I think you can see that. And I like that. Everyone now, especially with how much content is out there, we're aware more. So it's smart not to hide the production crew, I think. It's smart not to hide your other cameramen. Like, well, yeah, we know you have multiple angles of this shot. It's not gonna be a bad thing if when you're panning the camera, you see another camera guy. Like that's life. That's what you're doing. You're filming. It's reality what you're doing.
Well, that too, and people have to remember that just because it's difficult what I'm going through, the camera guys, what they have to go through is even more difficult. They're carrying cameras. Like some of the environments that Mark and Mario, Mark Livens is my business partner and the director of the shows, and Mario Aldecoa is our wildlife biologist and one of our camera operators. And then we usually have another specialist or two with us, depending on the location, that knows the environment that we're in, knows the best places to look for some of these animals. So we're a very small crew, right? Anywhere between, including myself, 3 to 5 people at a maximum. And it's tough, the elements that these guys have to go through. So that's why we like to show some of those aspects of it. I mean, when it came to something like Man vs. Wild, every season they would have an episode where they would interview the crew, and the crew would talk about what it was like to follow bear into these environments. Those were my favorite episodes because you really understood how difficult it was to make what these shows are.
What about Bigfoot? You ever see him out there?
I wish. If I had seen Bigfoot at this point, we'd have the most viral video in the world. But I will be honest, every time we're in a location, my wildlife biologist Mario and I are always joking about, man, if we could ever just stumble upon some primate in an area that it shouldn't be, and we could just get one shot, how crazy viral that would go. I mean, I know that's the shot everybody's always looking for, and people always want to know, do I think Bigfoot exists? I don't know. I have yet to be disproven that Bigfoot did at least exist at some point in time. Could it still be out there? I love mysteries, so who knows? Maybe it is, and maybe we'll get that shot someday.
Have you ever talked to Les Stroud about that? I think he speaks about a story how he could hear a Bigfoot. He would mimic the sound that it was doing back, and I think he even went out and did a show searching for it.
He did. He had it was either a 3 or 4 part series that he did on Bigfoot. I think it was 4 parts, and I can't remember if I've seen all of them, but I was super engaged to what that was because, again, from a show host perspective and somebody that truly has spent a lot of time, especially in the Canadian backcountry, right? You have to think about all of that land that is out there that something like this could potentially exist in. If anybody was to ever go out and do a series on it and do it well, it would be Les Stroud. And I thought, if Les has got stories, I'm going to believe him.
But what is Bigfoot? Like, that's what people are searching for. Bigfoot. What is it? There's definitely animals and species that we don't know about that are living deep in the jungle somewhere. But like, what is Bigfoot?
I mean, honestly, if I were to try to break it down scientifically, I would say it's a missing link between humans as an upright walking member of great apes, so to speak, and essentially the great apes that exist, things like orangutans and big gorillas. I mean, back when the continents were connected, when you're looking at Pangea, some of the areas that some of these mountain silverbacks live would have connected into the Pacific Northwest. So could there have been a group of apes that wandered and was separated? You know, you've got a lot of animals in areas like New Zealand or Madagascar that are completely cut off from the major land masses that have evolved into their own unique, distinct species or variations of species. So is it possible that a large primate could have been sanctioned off from the rest of the primates, you know, in other parts of the world and evolved to the point where it was either a complete biped or semi-quadruped? I don't know. I mean, but it's an interesting theory to always be investigating. There are a lot of research experts out there that really dive deep into the Bigfoot world. There's a guy named Dr. Jeff Meldrum. I believe he's at the Idaho University, University of Idaho or something like that, who's one of the most renowned Bigfoot experts that's out there right now. And he wrote actually a really fascinating book on his theories about the existence of a large semi-bipedal or fully bipedal primate that could potentially be out there at some point. But again, until science has an actual skeleton and a body, I don't think anything can be proven.
No way. What about the other YouTube people? Like, do you talk to, like, the guy that pops in my mind is Casey Neistat? Do you talk to guys like that?
I don't know Casey in the sense like personal friend standpoint. I mean, I don't text with Casey Neistat. We see each other at events every once in a while, say what's up to each other, and just, man, congratulations on the awesome year that you're having. I love the work that Casey does. I mean, I think Casey is the quintessential example of somebody that started out in a direction just like me, aiming for a film career, right? And Casey had a number of different deals at different points. I think with like HBO, him and his brother were developing a series for a while. And what I love about Casey is that he's a filmmaker at heart. He's a filmmaker through and through, even with the content that he's producing today. And what YouTube did was give him a platform to exercise his creative talents. And in my opinion, he is without question one of the most talented movie makers, so to speak, on the platform today. And he's using YouTube to do more than just vlog. And while a lot of the stuff that he does is vlogging, he also creates these much larger projects. One of his best friends, Jesse Wellens, who I also know, they did the amazing video last year where Casey flew on the human drone. Did you see that video that he did?
No, the human drone? No.
Human drone, yeah. He works really closely with Samsung, and they produced the first, like the world's largest drone. It was so big, it was actually able to lift Casey up off of the ground, and he flew from a drone. It was amazing. Him and Jesse also have something else really big in the works for this holiday season. They just released a couple videos the other day showing them scouting the inside of an abandoned mall. So I'm really excited to see what they have come out, because it was funny. Last year, Casey had the drone video come out the same time we had the bullet ant video come out. And I love just seeing everybody in the YouTube space knowing when the best times of year are to release your big videos, your sort of star content for the year. So we've got our big Centipede episode coming out, and I'm excited to see what Casey's got coming.
How does the money work with YouTube? Because you obviously, with that many subscribers, so they have AdSense, I know, and they'll play commercials before your episodes. And then, like, how does that work? Do you get a monthly check every 2 weeks? How does that work?
I can't really dive into too much of the whole business situation of YouTube if you don't mind. We just don't disclose a lot of what that is. But, you know, for what most people do know is that, yes, the majority of YouTube revenue does come from AdSense, which are the advertisements that play before a video. And then, of course, now during videos. The longer videos get, the more YouTube is encouraging us to put, you know, these short commercial breaks in between content, which is good for, of course, the content creators and YouTube as Google as a platform as a whole. But one thing that people don't realize too is that the content creators actually don't make any revenue off of ads if you skip an ad. So you have to actually let the ad run. I think it's somewhere between 10 and 12 seconds to be considered what's called a true view. So if you skip the ads, content creators don't get paid. But at the end of the day, for us as content creators, just having a distribution platform where we're able to share our content, I think is without question the most important thing. And obviously we do well enough to keep the adventures and keep the content going, as I think all professional YouTubers would agree with.
Does it change with like certain levels you hit, like 1 million subscribers? I know they'll send you stuff, but does your relationship with YouTube change as you grow?
Yeah, it certainly does. I mean, I know once we sort of got to what's considered the professional level of YouTube, which ranges between 100,000 and a million subscribers. And then once you go beyond that, we have better contact with YouTube than, say, somebody that is just uploading dog and cat videos out of their bedroom that has their mom and dad and their neighbors as subscribers. But YouTube's been, extremely supportive of the content that we create. I'm fortunate enough to be invited to the YouTube Creators Summit. Got to be a part of VidCon last year and hopefully this year again. And YouTube is great when it comes to opening up their platform and wanting feedback from their content creators. And I think at the end of the day, that's what's most important for us as creators, is being able to talk to YouTube as a platform and say, hey guys, this is what's working for us. This is what we think doesn't work. What if you guys tried this? And a lot of times they take the content creator suggestions.
What can someone do to grow their subscribers? So I put my podcasts on YouTube, the ones where people actually have video, but I can't really gain much of a footing or get many people to subscribe. I know I'm not consistent enough. I know that's number one. You have to be consistent putting content out, which I'm actually moving towards that. I'm going to be more consistent, but what are the little, not tricks, but what are things no-brainers that people should be doing to gain subscribers?
Well, you definitely nailed it by saying consistency. And the thing for us where we found ourselves in a very fortunate position, going all the way back to when we started this conversation talking about Discovery Digital Networks, originally they asked us to produce 12 pieces of content, right? 12 little 5-minute snippets about animals and environments. We were extremely ambitious. And like I said, produced around 50 pieces of content. And when we launched our YouTube channel, we were putting out 2 episodes a week, and we've been putting out 2 episodes a week since this launch. So at this point, that equates to somewhere around 350 odd pieces of content. We've taken off a Wednesday here or a Friday there, but we've been very, very consistent. And what the audience grew to understand was that, okay, Brave Wilderness is going to put out an episode every Wednesday and Friday. If we didn't, the couple times that we didn't, there was one instance where we had to skip a Friday because Mark and I were on a business trip and we couldn't get something to upload right. And we're like, okay, we'll put it out on Saturday instead of Friday. And everybody was like, oh my gosh, did Coyote get eaten by something? Why isn't there an episode? And we were like, whoa, the audience takes this really, really seriously. So that consistency becomes something that the audience recognizes and then they can rely on. And when you start to build your following, and this is whether it's for your channel, AJ, or it's for anybody out there that's listening or watching, being committed to what it is that your content is first and foremost the most important thing. And a lot of times when people ask me, well, I want to start a YouTube channel, what should I do? I oftentimes tell them, create as much content as you can in advance. So let's say you're going to launch a channel January 1st. You should have spent all of November and December producing content. Get yourself at least 10 to 15 pieces of content ahead so that as you're releasing your content, you're producing more and you're constantly keeping up with that wave, but the wave never stops. That's the key thing. Keep that consistency going.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Common sense. Yeah, it makes 100% sense. That's the thing. Mm-hmm. And that's the tough thing, is to continue. For podcasting, at least, for me, is finding and booking enough people to do it. Yeah, so that's the old. It's a no-brainer. I know where I fall short in that, but I enjoy doing it too. That's why I like doing it. I like talking to people on here, and I'm just going to do that more often and be more consistent. You're right.
Right. Well, and certainly you made a really important point. Loving what you're doing is without question. Don't even start if you don't love what it is that you're going to start doing, because it's your life. I mean, for us, my production team at this point, we have dedicated our lives to making this content. Now, if we had gone out, done 50 pieces of content, put it out there, would some people have watched it? Yeah, but they would have been like, oh, remember that one time when that guy made that short animal series on YouTube, and everybody would have forgotten about it. And it's taken us this 3 years of making that content consistent, obviously making your quality as high as you possibly can. And we go back and look at some of our early episodes and the cameras we were using, some of the lighting we would let ourselves get away with, or just, my general style of presentation. The more you practice, the more you learn, the better you're going to get. So that consistency then leads into the content quality being better as you go on. And then, of course, it has to do with just the quantity. So all of those equate then at the end of the day to being consistent, loving what you're doing, making sure it's of as highest quality value as you can, and then having a massive quantity. And again, the more you have, the more, once a new person comes to your channel and finds one piece of content that they may have stumbled upon, right? So us right now, what we're doing is an example. Maybe somebody comes and finds Coyote Peterson on your podcast and like, whoa, and AJ, you've interviewed all these other people that we're also interested in. Now they're binge watching your content. So when people come to the Brave Wilderness channel for something like, let's say, the Warrior Wasp sting, and they're like, man, this guy's crazy. Why would you do something like this? Get stung by what this is? Is there any education behind the purpose of this? And certainly they'll find that within the episode. And then they dive into the channel and they're like, well, wait, this guy's also swam with manatees, and he's also gotten up close with a cute baby reindeer, and he's also really passionate about wolverines, but don't say that when we're talking Ohio State. You know, all these other different animals that we are educating people about that don't necessarily involve me rolling around on the ground in pain, right? So having that massive catalog gives an audience a lot to watch.
Makes sense, man. I like it. And final, just a couple more for you. How was it? How was it doing Hot Ones with Sean Evans? I love that show. I watch him all the time, and you were great on there.
Do you want to go on Hot Ones?
Oh man,
dude, let's get you on Hot Ones.
I would do it. Of course, I would do it. I think Sean's amazing. I think he had such a cool idea in the show, and he's so good at it, and he's a monster just eating the wings and the sauce like it's nothing. Continues it. How was what compared to what you thought? How was it going in?
Well, first, just speaking on behalf of Sean, Sean is epic. One of the most professional presenters / hosts I've ever worked with. And we've since become pretty good friends after doing that show. His whole team is just so on point, and it's such a brilliant concept. And actually, to prepare for going on the show, I went to Quaker Steak and Lube here in Columbus, and they were rumored for having these atomic wings. I don't know if you've ever tried them. You've got to like sign a waiver and stuff like that. They come out in foil. Dude, that was a rough Friday afternoon. Just, they were hot. Let's put it that way. Not as hot as anything that they had on Hot Ones. And I understand why. Like, you couldn't function after eating the wings at Quaker Steak. But working my way up through those 10 wings, like you start off with sriracha and you're like, you know, it's got a lot of good flavor to it. You really do start to find yourself in a different state of mind where you're presenting words, but in your head, you're like, is that what I'm actually saying? It sounds one way in your head. It's coming out a totally different way. And you'll see all these, you know, big time stars just breaking down on the show. And it took a lot for me to stay composed by the end of what it was. And my mouth and stomach and other places were on fire for a solid 48 hours after that.
Wow. Yeah, it's really fun for people that don't know. He has a huge following now, and he gets big time stars. And it's a unique twist because there's so much content out there. There's so many interview shows, whatever. So no one's done that until Sean, though. Like, hey, how about I eat these 10 wings, increasing in crazy how hot they are as we go up. And then it breaks down, or it's just a different way to talk to somebody, because then he's bringing out his computer, showing up Instagram pictures, explaining the gram, all the stuff he does is really unique. So I give him a lot of credit, man.
Yeah, well, totally, man. I will text Sean today and be like, we need to put AJ Hawk on Hot Ones. I mean, I don't know what big time football players he's had on there, but with your career and certainly coming from the world of being a Buckeye, nothing's tougher than a Buckeye. So I think you do really well up against all those hot wings. Yeah, I don't know. I'd be scared, man. I'd be scared. Well, Coyote, I really appreciate you coming on here, man. We look forward to your future, all of your future content that you will put out. Hopefully you have a couple more bites coming out. Is that right? Yeah, we got the giant desert centipede bite coming out here in just about 2 weeks. It's probably going to be the most epic video we've released this year. I've already seen the cut of the episode. It's movie quality. It's pretty cool. Is that the hospital one? That's the one where I did have to receive medical attention. Yep, that's it. Good. I can't wait to see you're here with us today. So you're not dead. Yeah. It didn't kill you, but you went to the hospital, so we get a little bit of everything. That's right. It's gonna be a good episode, and I really appreciate you having me on the show, man. I've been a fan of yours for a long time, so it's really cool to get to meet you like this. And if you ever want me back on the show, man, stop everything I'm doing to be on it. Awesome, man. Thank you very much, Cody. We'll talk to you down the road, man. Thanks. All right, sounds good. Thanks, AJ. Thanks.
We're glad you could join us for today's conversation. After you subscribe to the show, head over to thehawkcast.com or reach out to AJ directly on Twitter at @officialAJHawk to recommend future guests that will help us inspire people to keep talking. Thanks again, and we look forward to speaking with you next time on the HawkCast.